The Picts, Scotland's vanished tribe. The Picts lived across northern Scotland and left traces in the form of stone carvings, hill forts, and remains of fortified settlements. Their origin is debated, with ideas ranging from Celtic roots to long-standing local ancestry, but no written explanation survives. They were known for decorated bodies or tattoos described in early sources, possibly used to show rank, kinship, or spiritual meaning. Their stones show animals, warriors, tools, and abstract shapes that may represent clans, events, or beliefs. These carvings form a non-written system of communication that scholars still study. Pictish life depended on farming, hunting, and herding. Villages were placed near rivers, coasts, and sheltered valleys. Their homes were built from wood and stone, often protected by earthworks or palisades. Hill forts helped control territory and offered safety from raids. Their fighters used knowledge of the land to outmaneuver enemies, relying on speed, ambushes, and mobility. Conflicts between neighbouring groups were common, as were clashes with Roman forces on the edge of their territory. Their society included leaders, skilled workers, and families connected through kin groups. Responsibilities were divided within these groups, and leadership passed through complex lines that remain unclear due to the lack of records. Religious practices appear tied to natural forces, animals, and ancestral memory. Carved stones may have served ceremonial roles, marked boundaries, or honoured individuals. Gatherings and rituals likely helped preserve traditions and maintain unity. Over time, their culture blended with that of incoming Gaels. This merging changed language, leadership, and everyday customs. As groups joined through alliances and marriage, Pictish identity gradually shifted, and by the end of the early medieval period, their name disappeared from written references. Lineages, symbols, and place names, however, continued within the new communities. Their craftsmanship appears in tools, ornaments, and stone carvings found at settlement sites. These objects show skill in metalwork, design, and construction, revealing a people capable of adapting to Scotland's demanding environment. Farming systems, fortified structures, and artistic traditions demonstrate organised communities with shared practices and long-standing cultural memory. Walking through areas once occupied by the Picts, archaeologists find traces of their homes, fortifications, and carved stones. These remains show families working fields, warriors preparing defences, and communities shaped by land and tradition. The stones record parts of their worldview, daily life, and leadership structures, giving insight into a society that endured challenging conditions while maintaining strong cultural practices. Stone symbols no one can decode, yet. Across ancient lands, carved stones show symbols, patterns, and shapes that remain undeciphered. Some carvings are simple, lines, circles, and spirals, but others form complex shapes that resemble animals, maps, or abstract stories. Each mark was carefully created and likely carried meaning connected to daily life, beliefs, or social structure. These carvings represent a system of communication or memory, although their exact purpose is unknown. Creating the stones required skill, patience, and knowledge of both the material and the symbolic meaning. Carvers worked with simple tools on hard rock, following techniques and traditions passed down over generations. Each line, spiral, or animal form was deliberate, representing information, guidance, or cultural knowledge. The stones likely connected people to the land, seasonal cycles, and spiritual or ancestral beliefs. The stones were placed at significant locations. Some stand along old pathways near settlements or beside rivers, suggesting they may have marked boundaries, sacred sites, or communal gathering places. Others appear near hill forts or burial mounds, possibly to honour leaders, warriors, or important events. Patterns and symbols repeat across wide areas, hinting at shared systems of meaning and cultural links between distant communities. Archaeologists and researchers have compared these carvings with other ancient scripts and analysed patterns, but no definitive decoding exists. Some symbols repeat with variations, while others appear only once. Certain spirals and geometric forms may correspond to celestial events, calendars, or agricultural cycles, but interpretations remain speculative. The consistency of shapes across distances indicates long-standing cultural knowledge preserved in stone. The craftsmanship shows careful planning and artistry. Carvers maintained symmetry, spacing, and alignment, suggesting that the carvings were more than decoration. They were deliberate records of ideas or beliefs. Metal tools or harder stones may have been used to etch the deep, lasting lines that have survived centuries of weathering. The skill required to produce these symbols indicates specialized knowledge passed through select individuals in the community. Over time, some stones incorporate new influences, such as the appearance of crosses and other religious symbols alongside older carvings. This suggests a blending of earlier traditions with emerging cultural or spiritual practices, showing adaptation and continuity. The placement, pattern, and design of each stone reflect a culture attentive to environment, survival, and social memory. Even without full understanding, the stones provide insight into the society that created them. They reveal a people who observed nature, valued shared knowledge, and sought to communicate ideas across generations. Their carvings demonstrate a combination of artistry, utility, and cultural expression. These enduring marks show how ancient communities recorded identity, maintained memory, and connected with the world around them. Before Scotland existed, this happened. Before Scotland existed as a named nation, humans lived across its hills, rivers, and forests, adapting to a harsh and changing environment. They hunted, fished, and farmed, learning the rhythms of the seasons and the cycles of nature. Communities built homes from wood, stone, and turf, and fortified settlements protected families from rivals and invaders. Every action, from planting crops to crafting tools, reflected careful observation and deep knowledge of the land. Tribes in the north developed skills in making weapons, tools, and art. Stone, wood, and metal were used not only for survival, but also for cultural expression. Boats and rivers allowed travel, trade, and contact with other communities, spreading ideas, techniques, and traditions. Pathways connected villages to rivers, forests, and sacred sites, where people performed rituals, celebrated, mourned, and remembered ancestors. These sites acted as social, spiritual, and cultural centres. Among these peoples, the Picts left a notable mark. They created symbol stones etched with spirals, animals, warriors, and abstract patterns. While their exact meaning is unknown, the stones demonstrate a form of communication and identity that went beyond spoken language. Villages were fortified, and tools were refined over generations, showing organised communities that taught skills, traditions, and stories orally. The environment shaped daily life. Hills, rivers, lochs, and forests were central to survival and spiritual practice. Animals, weather, and geography influenced rituals, movement, and resource management. Seasonal cycles dictated planting, harvesting, hunting, and travel. Knowledge of celestial patterns may have helped in timing rituals or early timekeeping. Human activity was intertwined with natural forces, requiring respect and careful planning. Over centuries, tribes merged or split, clans formed, and languages evolved. Social structures, ceremonies, and leadership systems emerged, laying the groundwork for future communities. Trade, art, and conflict left traces in stone, metal, and legend. Hill forts, standing stones, ancient roads, and ceremonial sites provide evidence of daily life, strategy, and culture. These remnants reflect a balance between survival, creativity, and social cohesion. Life in these early communities combined practicality with expression. People crafted tools, created art, and maintained traditions while adapting to environmental challenges. Observing, learning, and transmitting knowledge ensured continuity. The traces left behind, settlements, artifacts and carvings, offer insight into a society that thrived long before kingdoms, maps, or castles existed. The Scots came from Ireland. The hidden origin. Before Scotland existed as a named nation, people lived across its hills, rivers, forests and coasts. They adapted to a harsh and changing environment, learning to survive in cold winters, wet seasons and unpredictable weather. Hunting provided meat and furs, while fishing in rivers and lakes supplied food for daily life. Small plots of land were farmed for barley, oats and vegetables. Livestock such as cattle, sheep and pigs added milk, meat and labour for farming. Every activity depended on careful planning, knowledge of the land and cooperation among families. Early communities built homes from wood, stone and turf. Villages were often fortified with earthen walls, palisades or stone foundations to protect against rivals or invaders. Hill forts and other elevated sites were used for defence, observation and social gathering. Families lived close together, sharing labour and passing skills from elders to children. Tools were made of stone, wood and later metal, shaped for hunting, farming, building and crafting. These tools required skill and practice, reflecting knowledge that developed over generations. In the north, tribes became skilled in both survival and culture. They crafted weapons, built homes, and created art to communicate ideas, record events, or express identity. Boats and rivers allowed travel, trade, and contact with distant communities. Traders and travellers brought new ideas, techniques, and goods, which influenced local life. Ancient pathways connected villages, rivers, forests, and sacred sites. Standing stones, hilltops, and secluded glens served as places for ritual, celebration, mourning, and memory. These sites acted as centres for social, spiritual, and cultural activity, showing that early people sought meaning beyond survival. Among these communities, the Picts left a significant mark. They carved stones with spirals, animals, warriors, and abstract patterns. While the meaning of these carvings is uncertain, they demonstrate a form of communication and cultural identity beyond spoken language. Villages were fortified in strategic locations, and tools and weapons were refined over time. Education and skill were passed orally, teaching children crafts, hunting techniques, and the stories of their people. Symbols on stones may have marked clan identity, territory, or important events, reflecting a society that valued memory and tradition. The environment shaped every aspect of life. Hills, rivers, lochs, and forests were sources of food, shelter, and spiritual significance. Animals, weather, and geography guided daily routines, rituals, and movement. Seasonal cycles dictated planting, harvesting, hunting, and travel. Knowledge of the stars, sun, and moon helped time activities, possibly informing early rituals or calendars. Human survival depended on observing, understanding, and respecting the patterns of nature. Over centuries, tribes merged, split, and evolved. New clans formed, languages changed, and social structures developed. Ceremonies, leadership, and law emerged to maintain order and identity. Trade, art, and conflict left lasting traces in the landscape through artifacts, tools, forts, and ceremonial sites. Hill forts, standing stones, roads, and carvings reveal the organisation, creativity, and resilience of communities that thrived long before maps, kings, or castles existed. Life combined practicality and expression. People crafted tools, made art, and preserved knowledge while meeting daily survival needs. Skills were passed through teaching, observation, and practice. Villages functioned as units of labour, culture, and education. Standing stones, carved symbols, and hill forts recorded memory and identity, showing a society capable of both innovation and continuity. Each settlement, tool, and carving reflects planning, observation, and adaptation to both human and natural challenges. The sea and rivers connected people to distant regions. Trade and migration brought new techniques, ideas, and cultural exchange. Boats and water routes allowed movement, communication, and contact with other communities. Cultural knowledge, skills, and artistic techniques spread through these connections, enriching local traditions while maintaining distinctive practices. Communities observed celestial and environmental patterns, aligning activities with natural rhythms to ensure survival and social cohesion. Animals and forests were central to daily life. Hunting provided food, hides, and tools, while domesticated animals supported farming and labour. Forests offered resources for building, fuel, and materials for crafts. Knowledge of the environment guided decisions on movement, hunting, and settlement placement. People used observation, memory, and inherited wisdom to interpret seasonal changes, animal behaviour, and natural events, maintaining a balance between survival and understanding the world around them. The traces left by these early people, hill forts, standing stones, carved tools, roads, and settlements, reveal a culture attentive to environment, social structure, and continuity. Communities were organised, skilled, and innovative, capable of both defending their homes and expressing identity through symbols and art. Knowledge was preserved through hands-on teaching, oral tradition, and cultural practice, ensuring that each generation learned to survive, adapt, and contribute to the wider society. Even without formal records, these early communities shaped the land and culture that would later become Scotland. Their settlements, carvings, and artefacts reveal a society that valued creativity, resilience, and knowledge. Survival, art, and social cohesion were intertwined, producing a legacy preserved in stone, earth, and memory. Life was challenging, but human ingenuity, observation, and cooperation allowed communities to endure, innovate, and thrive across centuries. Early Scots and their migration from Ireland. The early Scots moved from Ireland to western Scotland, settling along rugged hills, deep lochs, and fertile valleys. They travelled in small boats, guided by stars, winds, and inherited knowledge, facing storms and unknown waters. Families and clans arrived gradually, bringing language, customs, and skills that would shape communities in their new land. Upon arrival, they merged with local tribes, exchanging practices, learning survival techniques, and blending traditions to form cohesive settlements. Agriculture, fishing, and trade became central to daily life. Crops such as barley and oats were grown, while rivers and logs provided fish and fresh water. Livestock, including cattle, sheep, and pigs, contributed to food, labour, and clothing. Settlements were organised strategically near water and arable land. Homes were constructed from wood, turf, and stone, sometimes fortified with earthworks, palisades, or stone walls for protection against rival groups. Villages were centres of both survival and culture, where children learned skills, storytelling, and traditions through observation and practice. Hill forts, standing stones, and carved artefacts reflected social organisation and cultural identity. Leaders maintained laws, rituals, and communal responsibilities, ensuring cohesion and stability. Stone carvings recorded lineage, achievements, or spiritual beliefs, while tools and metalwork demonstrated skill and craftsmanship. Trade and contact with other communities introduced new ideas, techniques, and resources, enriching local practices without erasing traditions. Movement and adaptation were constant. Clans expanded, merged, or relocated in response to environmental challenges, resource availability, or conflicts. Knowledge of rivers, forests, hills, and coasts guided settlement patterns and travel routes. Seasonal changes dictated farming, hunting, and fishing cycles, while observation of celestial patterns informed timekeeping, rituals, and community events. Each generation refined skills, passed down stories, and preserved cultural memory through oral tradition and material culture. Interactions with other groups, including traders and raiders, shaped strategy, technology, and artistic expression. Boats connected communities along rivers and coasts, enabling trade and cultural exchange. Artifacts and carvings illustrate the integration of ideas, while local adaptation preserved the distinct identity of each community. The combination of survival, creativity, and social cohesion allowed the early Scots to establish lasting settlements in a challenging landscape. Over time, language and customs evolved as communities intermingled. Distinct practices emerged, reflecting both Irish roots and local influences. Agricultural techniques, artistic expression, ritual practices, and social structures adapted to new circumstances while retaining links to ancestral knowledge. The movement of peoples, the merging of clans, and the blending of traditions created a foundation for what would later be recognised as Scottish culture. The landscape influenced life profoundly. Hills, rivers, forests, and lochs were not merely physical features but integral to survival, identity, and ritual practice. Sacred sites, ceremonial spaces, and resource-rich areas were chosen carefully, balancing practical needs with spiritual and cultural significance. Communities observed environmental patterns, animal behaviour, and celestial cycles to maintain harmony, ensure survival, and preserve knowledge across generations. Craftsmanship and artistry were integral to community life. Tools, weapons, and household items reflected practical necessity and aesthetic value. Carvings and symbols on stones communicated clan identity, achievements, or spiritual beliefs, serving as lasting records in a world without widespread writing. Metalwork, woodworking, and textile production demonstrate both technical skill and cultural expression. Education was hands-on, with children learning essential skills while absorbing cultural knowledge and traditions through observation, storytelling, and participation. Defence and strategy were also essential. Fortified settlements, lookout points, and natural barriers were used to protect resources and families. Knowledge of terrain, weather, and seasonal patterns provided tactical advantage in conflicts. Communities adapted construction, agriculture, and movement strategies to respond to threats, while maintaining social cohesion and cultural practices. Trade, travel, and communication connected dispersed communities. Exchange of resources, techniques, and ideas allowed settlements to thrive even in isolated regions. Boats, pathways, and rivers provided networks for movement, enabling interaction between clans and with external groups. These connections supported cultural growth, technological advancement, and social integration, strengthening the resilience of early Scottish communities. Material and symbolic culture endured through time. Hill forts, standing stones, and carved objects preserved memory and identity, bridging generations. Settlements reflect the combination of adaptation, creativity, and knowledge that allowed communities to survive harsh climates and changing conditions. Observing these sites today reveals the ingenuity, resilience, and organisation of people who laid the foundations for later Scottish culture. Life among the early Scots combined survival, social structure, and cultural expression. Agriculture, hunting, fishing, craftsmanship, and ritual practices were intertwined, creating communities capable of enduring both environmental challenges and social change. Knowledge, skills, and traditions were transmitted carefully across generations, ensuring continuity and adaptation. The combination of movement, settlement, and cultural integration shaped both the landscape and the identity of the people, producing a legacy that would influence Scotland for centuries to come. Blue warriors, what were the Picts hiding? Long ago in the misty hills of northern Scotland, there was a people who wore the land on their skin. The Romans called them Picts, but what made them unforgettable were the stories of blue warriors who fought fiercely and vanished into legend. They painted or tattooed their bodies with blue designs, symbols that told tales of courage, battles, and life itself. The blue was not just decoration, it was a sign, a mark of identity, a way to show unity and strength. No one truly knows what the patterns meant, and perhaps that was the point. The Picts were masters of secrecy, using art, symbols, and their knowledge of the land to hide their true power. They lived in villages on hills, near rivers, and in forests, blending with nature, moving silently and striking only when necessary. Warriors trained from youth, learning to hunt, fight, and survive in a harsh and wild land. Their weapons were simple, yet their strategy was clever, using the terrain, ambush, and the element of surprise to defeat larger armies, including the Romans who feared their blue-painted courage. But the mystery goes beyond battles. The Picts carved symbols into stones, leaving messages, marks, or stories for those who could understand. These stones still stand today, yet their meaning remains hidden, as if the Picts wanted their history to survive in secret. Some say the blue designs were magical, protecting them in war, connecting them to the sky, the earth or spirits unseen. Others believe they were symbols of rank, bravery, or tribal allegiance. Every symbol, every hill fort, and every story carries whispers of a people who valued life, courage, and community above all else. They were farmers, hunters, artists, and guardians of their land, living in balance with nature and each other. Yet their most fascinating trait was the way they vanished from the pages of history, leaving traces of existence but hiding the full story behind blue skin and carved stones. Scholars and explorers have tried to understand them for centuries, studying bones, villages, and stone symbols, but the Picts remain elusive, as if intentionally guarding their secrets. Their disappearance was not defeat, but transformation, merging with other tribes, leaving behind culture, legends, and courage that shape Scotland's identity. Walking the hills today, one can almost feel the blue warriors watching, their presence alive in the wind, the rivers, and the stones, a reminder of strength, mystery, and the art of hiding power in plain sight. They teach that identity is more than what we see, that courage is both visible and hidden, and that some mysteries are meant to endure, inspiring curiosity and respect. The Picts were not just warriors painted in blue, they were keepers of knowledge, artists of survival, and a people who lived boldly in a world that demanded resilience. Even centuries later, their story flows through Scotland, carved into stone, whispered in legends, and painted in the imagination of those who wonder what it truly meant to be a blue warrior. Macbeth, the real king they erased. Rising through the ranks as a warrior and chieftain, he gained the respect of peers and followers for his courage, strategy, and leadership. Unlike the dramatized figure in later literature, Macbeth was a man who understood the complexities of governance, the importance of alliances, and the delicate balance between authority and survival. Scotland in his time was not a unified nation, but a patchwork of kingdoms, clans, and territories, each governed by local leaders whose support was essential for any ruler seeking power. Navigating this landscape required intelligence, foresight, and the ability to respond to sudden crises. The path to the throne was fraught with danger, yet Macbeth demonstrated both military skill and political acumen, securing his position through merit as much as inheritance. Battles in the 11th century were brutal, unpredictable, and demanding. Armies were composed of warriors loyal to their clans, equipped with swords, axes, shields, and the occasional chainmail or protective gear. Strategy was critical. Knowledge of terrain, weather, and enemy movements often determined the outcome more than sheer strength. Macbeth was deeply involved in these conflicts, personally leading troops, organising defences and maintaining morale. The northern and western territories of Scotland were particularly challenging, with rugged hills, deep forests, and rivers that could serve as natural barriers or traps for advancing forces. Control over such landscapes required not only courage but an understanding of geography, fortifications, and logistics. Hill forts, wooden palisades, and stone keeps dotted the land, and their maintenance was essential to secure regions, protect villages, and establish centres of power. Macbeth's decisions regarding the placement of defences and the allocation of troops reflected both tactical thinking and a keen awareness of the political stakes. Leadership in Macbeth's time extended beyond warfare. Kings were expected to uphold laws, collect tribute, and ensure the stability of regions under their influence. This included mediating disputes between clans, regulating trade, and maintaining alliances that could prevent rebellion or external invasion. The social hierarchy was complex, with noble families, chieftains, and warriors forming networks of obligation and loyalty. Failure to respect these relationships could quickly lead to unrest, rebellion, or assassination. Macbeth navigated these dynamics with a combination of firmness and diplomacy. Records, though limited, suggest that he maintained order and commanded respect across his realm. Coins minted during his reign indicate economic activity and the assertion of royal authority, while chronicles reference interactions with both Scottish and neighbouring rulers, reflecting a network of regional politics that required constant attention. Religion and culture also played roles in governance. Christianity had established roots in Scotland by the 11th century, connecting the kingdom to wider European networks. Macbeth was known to support the church, contributing to monasteries and religious institutions, which in turn reinforced his legitimacy and moral authority. Religious observance was intertwined with political life. Kings were expected to honour saints, support clergy, and participate in ceremonies that affirmed their rule. At the same time, pre-Christian traditions and localised beliefs persisted, influencing law, ritual, and social norms. Macbeth had to navigate this cultural complexity, balancing the expectations of the church, local customs, and his own strategic priorities. This cultural negotiation was an essential aspect of kingship, requiring sensitivity and an understanding of both symbolism and practice. Despite his accomplishments, Macbeth's reputation was later overshadowed by stories written by chroniclers with their own agendas. Rival factions, political enemies, and those benefiting from his downfall had reasons to distort his image. Over time, these narratives evolved into legend. Portraying him as a tyrant motivated solely by ambition and murder, Shakespeare's later dramatisation amplified these elements, further embedding a fictionalised version of Macbeth in the cultural imagination. The real Macbeth was far more nuanced, a ruler capable of both decisiveness and prudence, balancing ambition with duty, personal strength with collective responsibility. Archaeological evidence, coins, and contemporary records hint at a king who maintained order, defended his people, and governed with intelligence. The political environment of 11th century Scotland demanded constant vigilance. Neighbouring kingdoms, both within Scotland and in regions such as England and the Norse territories, posed threats that could quickly escalate into war. Alliances shifted frequently, and betrayal was always a possibility. Macbeth demonstrated skill in diplomacy, negotiating truces, securing marriages, and forming agreements that strengthened his position. His ability to navigate these relationships highlights a ruler who understood that power was not simply wielded with the sword, but maintained through negotiation, intelligence, and the careful management of loyalties. Macbeth's military campaigns extended beyond internal affairs. Northern Scotland faced occasional incursions from Norse forces, whose raids and settlements influenced coastal regions and islands. Protecting these territories required not only military strategy, but also an understanding of trade, settlement patterns, and the movement of populations. Macbeth's reign coincided with a period of cultural blending, where Gaelic traditions, Norse influences, and emerging Scottish identities intersected. He governed in a time when language, custom, and law were fluid, yet his rule contributed to the stabilisation and integration of these diverse elements into a functioning kingdom. Governance in this era also demanded economic oversight. Agriculture, cattle rearing, and trade were vital for sustaining communities and funding military campaigns. Macbeth ensured that tribute was collected, resources were managed, and essential infrastructure such as roads and fortifications was maintained. These administrative responsibilities required careful attention and delegation, illustrating a king who combined martial prowess with organisational skill. Social cohesion depended on a ruler who could enforce justice, resolve disputes, and maintain loyalty, roles that Macbeth fulfilled throughout his reign. The real Macbeth story challenges modern perceptions of history and myth. It reveals a ruler navigating complexity with pragmatism and courage, whose accomplishments were eroded by the narratives of successors and storytellers. By examining archaeological records, contemporary chronicles, and the context of 11th century Scotland, a portrait emerges of a king who was strategic, responsible, and resilient. His reign demonstrates that leadership was never straightforward. It required balancing war, diplomacy, administration, and culture, often under conditions of extreme uncertainty. Macbeth's legacy, though overshadowed in popular imagination, shaped the political, cultural, and social landscape of Scotland, influencing governance, law, and the relationships between clans and kingdoms for generations. Ultimately, Macbeth's life shows that history is complex, layered, and often distorted by later narratives. The real king was neither villain nor tyrant in the simplistic sense, but a ruler navigating a volatile world with skill, courage, and foresight. He led armies, defended territories, upheld law, supported the church, managed diplomacy, and maintained the loyalty of his people. Even as myths grew around his name, the foundations he established contributed to Scotland's stability and identity. His story teaches that leadership is multifaceted, survival requires intelligence as much as strength, and the past often holds truths far richer than the legends that survive. Through careful study of documents, coins, fortifications, and chronicles, Macbeth's reign can be reconstructed as a period of effective governance, military skill, and political acumen, revealing a king erased from legend but alive in the land he governed and the people he protected, the Viking Age, that almost changed Scotland forever. The Vikings sailed into northern Scotland in longships, reaching coasts, rivers, and islands with speed and skill. Their arrival brought both danger and opportunity, as communities faced sudden raids and the challenge of adapting to a new presence. Coastal villages strengthened defences, building palisades, watch posts, and fortified homes to resist attacks. Local leaders organised militias and trained warriors, learning new strategies to counter the raiders' knowledge of terrain and surprise tactics. At the same time, some clans formed alliances, exchanging goods, knowledge, and labour, recognising that cooperation could be as valuable as resistance. Settlements emerged where Vikings established communities. Islands like Orkney, Shetland, and the Hebrides became centres for trade, farming, and craftsmanship. Houses were built from timber and stone, and farms were cultivated to support growing populations. Trade networks extended across the North Sea, connecting Scotland to Norway, Denmark, and beyond. Artisans crafted tools, jewellery, and weapons, combining local and Norse techniques. Graves and artefacts show a blending of cultures, revealing the integration of customs, beliefs, and symbols. Norse influence enriched Scotland, bringing new ideas, skills, and material culture that reshaped daily life and artistic expression. Language and place names reflect this period. Coastal and island regions retain Norse words, marking settlements, landscapes, and rivers. These linguistic traces hint at centuries of interaction, demonstrating how Norse and Gaelic cultures intertwined. People adapted both socially and economically, learning new farming techniques, maritime skills and crafts. Knowledge of navigation, shipbuilding and long-distance trade expanded local capabilities. Communities became resilient, able to respond to both threats and opportunities presented by the new arrivals. Life for ordinary people involved observation, adaptation, and cautious engagement. Villages watched the seas for approaching ships, prepared supplies, and trained warriors to defend against attacks. At the same time, everyday interaction introduced foreign goods, ideas, and practices. Metalwork, tools, and household items were influenced by Norse design. Trade brought timber, furs, and weapons, creating connections between distant regions. Survival depended on flexibility, vigilance, and understanding when to resist and when to cooperate. Clans and local rulers balanced diplomacy, alliance, and warfare. Decisions about loyalty, tribute, and protection were complex, requiring negotiation and strategic thinking. Leaders weighed threats, opportunities, and the welfare of their communities, understanding that adaptability could secure both safety and prosperity. Long-term interaction with Viking settlers transformed governance, trade, and defense practices. New strategies were learned, new technologies adopted, and social structures adjusted to accommodate a changing cultural landscape. The blending of communities left a lasting legacy. Descendants of Vikings merged with local populations, creating genealogical and cultural continuity. Festivals, stories, and customs integrated elements of Norse and Scottish life. Artifacts reveal a fusion of beliefs, symbols, and traditions, suggesting respect for ancestors, ritual practices, and communal identity. The material and symbolic legacy illustrates how a people can survive conflict, retain identity, and simultaneously absorb new influences. The Viking presence influenced both economy and culture. Trade extended to distant markets, exchanging goods such as timber, fish, and crafted items. Artistic techniques, including metalwork and carving, introduced new forms while blending with existing styles. Farming practices improved with knowledge of tools, crops, and animal husbandry brought from Norse homelands. Navigation, shipbuilding, and maritime expertise became part of Scottish life, contributing to coastal and island prosperity. Communities learned to respond creatively to challenges while maintaining cultural continuity. Over decades, raids became settlements, and threats became partnerships. The integration of people, language, and culture shaped Scotland's identity, influencing traditions, legal practices, and social organisation. Maritime knowledge strengthened defence and trade, while craftsmanship and art reflected a blend of styles. Communities adapted to both land and sea, thriving in a challenging environment shaped by weather, geography, and cultural exchange. Archaeological evidence of forts, homes, graves, and artefacts shows that Vikings were not just raiders, but also settlers and innovators. Long-term influence shaped language, economy, artistic expression, and social structures. Coastal life depended on maritime skills, trade, and careful resource management, ensuring survival and growth. Communities preserved their identity while absorbing new ideas, demonstrating resilience and adaptability over generations. The Viking Age transformed Scotland, creating connections, knowledge, and cultural fusion. Raids introduced fear, but trade and settlement brought skills, innovation, and lasting influence. Landscapes, artifacts, and place names carry evidence of this period, showing how human interaction, movement, and adaptation shape history. Scotland's identity was enriched through these centuries, a result of conflict, cooperation, and integration. The legacy of the Vikings remains visible in culture, geography, and tradition. reminding us that history is alive in both land and people. Scotland's lost kings, names we forgot. Long before the famous kings and queens of Scotland, long before castles filled with history and stories, there were rulers whose names have almost vanished from memory. These were the kings who shaped the land, defended it, and guided its people, yet history has forgotten them. They lived in a time when life was harsh, and leadership meant courage, wisdom, and endurance. Every decision could bring survival or ruin. Many of these kings ruled small kingdoms or tribes, uniting them against enemies, building alliances and navigating a world filled with danger and opportunity. Their names were once spoken with respect, tied to battles won, lands protected, and people guided. Over centuries, scribes, chroniclers, and storytellers focused on the kings who left the biggest mark, or those whose stories suited later narratives, while others faded into silence. Archaeological traces show that even forgotten kings left their mark in stone fortresses, hilltop settlements, and symbolic carvings, revealing glimpses of leadership, strategy, and culture. Some were fierce warriors who defended their people from invaders, others wise rulers who fostered trade, justice, and community. Yet all shared the same challenge: surviving in a land both beautiful and unforgiving, where loyalty, courage, and cunning were essential. Their stories teach us about resilience, vision, and the often unseen labour of leadership. Every forgotten king contributed to the Scotland we know today, from the shaping of territories to the traditions that survived in clans and culture. Names may have vanished, but their legacy remains in the land, the battles fought, the alliances forged, and the people who lived under their reign. Remembering them is like piecing together a puzzle from fragments, coins, ruins, manuscripts, and legends that hint at a life once powerful and significant. Scotland's lost kings remind us that history is more than famous names. It is the sum of many lives, decisions, and courage, often invisible but essential. Standing on ancient hills, walking through ruins, or gazing at the locks, one can almost feel the presence of these rulers, their ambition, struggles, and wisdom echoing across centuries. They teach that leadership is not always remembered in words, but in actions, influence, and the shaping of a people and a land. Even if their names are forgotten, their impact flows through history, culture, and memory, waiting for those who look closer to see the threads they wove. Scotland is not only built by the kings written in books, it is built by those lost to time, who ruled, protected, and inspired, leaving footprints in the earth and spirit of the nation. Their stories are lessons in courage, foresight, and the quiet power of influence, teaching us to value not just the famous, but those who worked in the shadows of history, shaping the world without recognition, leaving a legacy that flows silently through the hills, rivers, and culture of Scotland. The Lost Kings remind us that history is alive, waiting to be rediscovered, and that even forgotten names carry the weight of a nation's story. Why so many Scottish kings died mysteriously. Scottish kings often faced life-threatening danger simply by holding the crown. Their position brought authority, wealth, and influence, but also constant risk from rivals, ambitious relatives, rebellious clans, and even trusted allies. Battles, political intrigue, and unstable alliances made survival uncertain. The landscape itself added to peril. Harsh winters, flooded rivers, treacherous roads, and sudden disease could strike without warning. Even careful planning could not guarantee safety. Many deaths occurred in battle, defending territory against invaders or suppressing uprisings. Strategy, knowledge of terrain, and the loyalty of warriors determined the outcome, yet defeat or sudden injury could end a reign abruptly. Some kings were assassinated or poisoned, often secretly, leaving chroniclers to record vague explanations or omit details. Others vanished from records entirely, their fates unrecorded or deliberately obscured to protect successors or conceal scandal. Suspicion permeated royal courts, making every gathering, meal and council a potential threat. Royal succession was fraught with danger. Disputes over inheritance or authority often turned deadly as rivals struck swiftly to claim power. Alliances could shift overnight, and even trusted counsellors might betray a king for advantage. Maintaining loyalty required constant vigilance, negotiation, and displays of strength, as the line between friend and enemy was never clear. Kings balanced diplomacy, warfare, and administration simultaneously, aware that a single misstep could prove fatal. The deaths of Scottish kings often left communities unsettled. Sudden vacancies threatened stability, sparked conflicts among nobles, and tested the resilience of the people. Chroniclers sometimes embellish stories, attributing deaths to curses, divine punishment, or supernatural forces, enhancing the aura of mystery. Over time, these accounts shaped cultural memory, transforming political events into legends that continue to intrigue historians and storytellers. Place names, ruins, and battlefields serve as reminders of these rulers, their lives and sudden ends embedded in the land itself. Patterns of mysterious deaths reveal the pressures of medieval kingship. Leaders had to anticipate threats both external and internal, while ensuring the loyalty of their subjects. Warfare required courage, coordination, and adaptability. Yet victories could quickly turn to disaster. Environmental hazards compounded human dangers, with harsh winters, flooding, and limited food supplies increasing vulnerability. Survival demanded foresight, skill, and an ability to respond to unforeseen challenges swiftly. Poisoning was a particular concern in royal circles, where rivals sought to remove obstacles quietly. Even minor illnesses or accidents could provoke suspicion, as sudden deaths often became tangled with rumours of intrigue. Chroniclers and bards contributed to this perception by framing unexpected deaths as warnings or moral lessons, reinforcing the idea that kingship carried inherent risk. The crown symbolised authority, but it also marked vulnerability, making each reign precarious. Kings' responsibilities extended beyond survival. They were symbols of unity and governance. Decisions affected entire clans, economies and trade, and misjudgment could provoke rebellion or external attack. Leadership required balancing power with diplomacy, law with enforcement, and courage with caution. Every battle, negotiation or journey carried risk, illustrating how intertwined human decision-making and environmental factors were in determining fate. Over generations, the cumulative effect of sudden or unexplained deaths influenced the perception of Scottish monarchy. The crown became a symbol of both prestige and peril, inspiring legends, songs, and cautionary tales. Communities observed these patterns, learning to respect the dangers of power and the unpredictability of life. Leadership required intelligence, awareness, and resilience as much as physical strength or martial skill. Material evidence such as castles, battlefields, and chronicles offers insights into these patterns. Fortifications reveal defensive strategies, while historical documents hint at conflicts, alliances, and suspicious deaths. Even gaps in records provide clues about secrecy, political manoeuvring, and the risks inherent in ruling. Archaeology and historical analysis together illuminate the challenges faced by kings navigating a landscape both wild and politically treacherous. The mysterious deaths of Scottish kings teach enduring lessons about power, responsibility, and human vulnerability. They highlight the fragility of life and leadership, the dangers of ambition, and the constant presence of risk in a world shaped by both natural forces and human rivalry. Each sudden death reflects the complexities of governance, the interplay of loyalty and betrayal, and the delicate balance required to maintain order. Kings were human, subjected to the same uncertainties as their people, yet their choices carried consequences for entire realms. This legacy remains embedded in Scotland's culture, geography, and folklore. Hills, rivers, and ruins preserve memory of rulers whose lives ended unexpectedly, teaching caution, strategy, and respect for the burdens of leadership. Sudden death shaped the nation's history, reminding future generations that authority came at the cost of constant vigilance, adaptability, and intelligence. Scotland's kings, though many died mysteriously, left lessons of resilience, decision-making, and the delicate interplay of human ambition and natural forces. Influencing the land and culture for centuries to come, the crown no one could hold for long. In medieval Scotland, kingship was a position of immense responsibility and constant danger. The crown symbolised authority but demanded vigilance, courage, and strategic thinking. Rulers faced threats from rival clans, ambitious relatives, and invading forces, each seeking advantage or revenge. Mountains, rivers, forests, and hidden valleys shaped military and political strategy, giving defenders cover and providing opportunities for ambush. Every decision could spark rebellion, provoke invasion, or upset delicate alliances, making the survival of a reign uncertain from the very start. Power was not inherited easily. Succession often came after conflict, negotiation, or the death of a predecessor. New kings had to quickly establish authority, secure loyalty, and protect territories while navigating long-standing rivalries. A misjudged word or a failed military campaign could turn allies into enemies. Even victorious rulers faced threats from betrayal, assassination, or uprisings. Leadership required constant observation, an understanding of human motives, and the ability to act decisively under pressure. Intelligence and diplomacy were as essential as courage and strength in battle. Clans held significant local power, controlling land, resources, and communities. Kings depended on these alliances to govern effectively, yet loyalties were fragile and could shift with opportunity. Negotiation, marriage alliances, and fealty oaths were vital tools for maintaining influence. Failure to manage these relationships could leave a king isolated and vulnerable. Military strength alone was not enough. Successful rulers had to balance authority, tradition, and negotiation in a land of deeply rooted local powers. The crown demanded sacrifices. Kings often risked their lives daily, overseeing battles, enforcing laws, and responding to crises. They faced moral dilemmas in decisions affecting both allies and adversaries. Military campaigns, defensive preparations, and the administration of justice consumed their time and energy. Even routine governance required navigating the complex interplay of clan loyalties, resource allocation, and political intrigue. Every action had consequences, and missteps could lead to rapid downfall. Short reigns were common. Some rulers held power for only months, others for a few years. Chronicles and ruins testify to mysterious deaths, sudden depositions, and rulers erased from memory. Despite this, these fleeting reigns influenced Scotland's political and cultural development. Kings who survived long enough to govern effectively demonstrated remarkable skill in strategy, diplomacy, and leadership, balancing survival with the responsibilities of rule. Their stories illustrate that authority in Scotland was never stable, but dynamic and contingent on human skill and circumstance. Conflict was pervasive. Wars were fought over territory, honour, or succession. Even peaceful periods required vigilance, with surveillance of rivals and preparation for unexpected attacks. The crown was both a prize and a danger. It attracted ambition, envy, and intrigue. Holding power meant constant awareness of shifting loyalties and emerging threats. Military campaigns and strategic decisions were deeply intertwined with governance. As the safety of subjects, loyalty of allies, and stability of the kingdom depended on effective leadership. Material culture, fortresses, castles, and administrative centres reflect the challenges of kingship. These sites provided defence, facilitated governance, and demonstrated authority, but they also required maintenance, manpower, and resources. Leadership demanded oversight of these structures, ensuring they remained functional against attack and effective in supporting administration. Kings were responsible for protecting the land and people, while projecting power to maintain order. Even short reigns left legacies. Laws, alliances, and military campaigns shaped subsequent leadership and influenced cultural development. Each ruler navigated survival, governance, and ambition differently, creating a patchwork of influence across Scotland. Battles, treaties, and diplomacy defined relationships between clans and kings, demonstrating that leadership was a dynamic negotiation of power, risk, and strategy. The instability of the crown illustrates broader truths about power. Authority was fragile, contingent, and always contested. Kings who held power successfully balanced courage, intelligence, and diplomacy, yet even they faced constant threats from natural hazards, rivals, or political upheaval. Every short reign, every vanishing ruler, and every contested succession provides insight into resilience, strategy, and the human dimension of leadership. Life as a king required endurance, foresight, and adaptability, teaching lessons about survival and responsibility in a turbulent world. The story of Scotland's fleeting crowns demonstrates that leadership is never simple. Success depended on understanding people, geography, and circumstance simultaneously. Every battle, negotiation, and alliance shaped the kingdom, leaving traces in castles, settlements, and chronicles. Authority was not permanent. It had to be earned and maintained continuously. The crown symbolized not only reward but immense pressure, requiring constant vigilance and wisdom to navigate a landscape filled with danger, ambition, and uncertainty. Scotland's history of short-lived kings reflects a society where survival, strategy, and diplomacy were inseparable from power. The crown was both a symbol of achievement and a test of resilience. Rulers had to endure constant challenges, balancing authority with practicality, courage with intelligence, and ambition with caution. Even today, the echoes of these fleeting reigns are visible in ruins, castles, and the stories of vanished rulers, revealing a world where leadership was perilous, fleeting, and demanding of extraordinary skill and insight. How Scotland accidentally took England's throne. In the late Middle Ages, both Scotland and England faced political uncertainty. England struggled with dynastic disputes, internal conflicts, and fragile succession lines. Scotland managed its own kingdoms, clans, and traditions, navigating rivalries and alliances in a turbulent landscape. Succession depended on bloodlines, marriages, and generations of connections, creating a web of claims that few could foresee. Through this tangled network of heritage, a Scottish-born relative emerged as the closest legitimate heir to the English crown, a development no one had planned or predicted. This inheritance did not result from battle or conquest. The Scottish claimant assumed the English throne through lineage alone, bringing the northern kingdom into direct influence over the south. English leaders faced a choice: resist and risk chaos, or accept a ruler whose roots were foreign. Diplomacy, negotiation, and strategic alliances were essential to manage this transition. Advisors from Scotland travelled south, while English nobles adapted to a monarch whose perspective and background were shaped by a different culture and set of traditions. Both kingdoms adjusted to a shared monarchy, balancing law, governance, and social expectations. The unification of crowns created unprecedented challenges. Legal systems, cultural practices, and political norms differed between Scotland and England. Administrators worked to harmonise policies, while rulers had to respect local customs while asserting authority over two distinct realms. The Scottish king or noble brought advisors, practices, and perspectives north to south, blending administration and governance in ways that required patience, compromise, and strategic thinking. Negotiation was constant, as loyalty and influence needed careful management in regions that had previously been independent and often wary of each other. Over time, Scottish influence spread beyond its borders, not through conquest, but through heritage and circumstance. Cultural exchange followed political union, as ideas, art, and traditions moved between the kingdoms. Marriages, alliances, and administrative reforms strengthened connections, creating continuity across regions that had once operated separately. The accidental succession demonstrated that power could expand quietly, guided by inheritance and circumstance rather than force. Scotland's role in English politics became more prominent, reshaping alliances and strategic priorities for both nations. The sudden union of crowns reshaped governance and diplomacy. Rulers had to balance dual loyalties, understanding the expectations of people in two kingdoms with different histories and identities. Advisors and nobles from both lands interacted, exchanging knowledge, strategy, and influence. Policies were adjusted to suit multiple regions, reflecting compromise and adaptation. Scottish-born rulers brought unique perspectives, integrating northern resilience, clan structures, and political experience into a broader British context. Governance became a delicate exercise in leadership, foresight, and patience. This accidental rise also affected culture, law, and national identity. Traditions from both lands influenced ceremonies, administration, and societal norms. Scotland's customs travelled south, while English practices affected Scottish governance. Trade and communication expanded as shared rule created new opportunities and networks. Education, artistry, and literature saw exchange between the kingdoms, producing a blended cultural influence. Every decision carried long-term implications, shaping future dynasties and the political landscape of Britain for generations. The inheritance of the English throne by a Scottish ruler demonstrates that history is not always shaped by armies or conquest. Bloodlines, marriages, and unforeseen circumstances can produce profound effects, changing nations quietly yet permanently. Kings had to navigate dual responsibilities, maintaining loyalty to their homeland while governing a distant realm. Leadership required diplomacy, strategy, and the ability to inspire confidence across borders. The union of crowns showed how chance and circumstance could redefine power, influence, and identity. The legacy of this accidental succession is evident in both countries. Scotland's influence on English politics, law, and culture extended farther than previously imagined. Over time, the relationship between the kingdoms evolved, with shared governance influencing alliances, marriages, and strategic decisions. The unification of crowns created a foundation for future political integration while preserving distinct cultural identities. History remembers the event not as a conquest, but as a complex outcome of lineage, circumstance, and careful political management. The story teaches that the course of nations can change through subtle, unexpected paths. Heritage, inheritance, and careful negotiation proved as powerful as armies, and rulers had to adapt to responsibilities they had not anticipated. The Scottish claim to the English throne illustrates that leadership is often tested by chance as much as by ambition. The union of crowns reshaped political, cultural, and social landscapes, linking Scotland and England in ways that endure today. Scotland's accidental rise to power demonstrates how history is shaped by unpredictability, planning, and the intersections of lineage, creating consequences that ripple across centuries. The Stuarts, a family destined for chaos. The Stuarts were a royal family whose rule shaped Scotland, England, and beyond, often through conflict and unpredictability. Their reigns were marked by ambition, political intrigue, and recurring crises. Each generation faced rivalries within the family, disputes over succession, and opposition from nobles and neighbouring powers. Kings and queens balanced military strength, diplomacy, and governance, navigating alliances that could shift overnight. Trusted advisors could betray them, while enemies exploited any sign of weakness. Religion added another layer of complexity, with tensions between Catholics and Protestants fueling rebellion, shaping alliances and influencing policy. Wars were fought not only for land but for belief, requiring leaders to manage both ideology and practical survival. Personal rivalries often escalated into political crises. Siblings, cousins, and other relatives competed for influence, while marriages and treaties sought to stabilise power, but sometimes failed. Fortifications, armies, and strategy were crucial, yet even the most careful plans could be undone by circumstance, natural events, or misfortune. Exile, rebellion, and loss of authority were recurring experiences, yet the Stuarts often returned to power, showing resilience, intelligence, and determination. Their decisions left lasting consequences, shaping governance, culture, and national identity. The Stuarts' legacy was a mixture of triumph and turmoil. Their reigns illustrate how ambition, circumstance, and human nature combined to influence history. Success and disaster were intertwined, and leadership demanded courage, foresight, and adaptability. The family's story is preserved in castles, laws, chronicles, and cultural memory, reflecting both brilliance and chaos. They demonstrate that ruling a kingdom required constant vigilance, political skill, and the ability to endure setbacks. The Stuarts' journey reminds us that power is never simple, and that ambition, circumstance, and human decisions together shape the course of nations. Mary, Queen of Scots, a life wrapped in secrets. Mary, Queen of Scots, inherited the crown as a child in a world of ambition, danger, and shifting loyalties. Scotland, with its rugged highlands and proud clans, was only part of her stage. Her influence reached England, France, and Europe. From the start, plots surrounded her, and alliances were fragile. Nobles, regents, and rival factions all sought advantage. Every marriage, family tie, and personal choice carried political consequences, intertwining her life with the survival and stability of the kingdom. Her cousin, Queen Elizabeth of England, watched closely, wary of claims to the English throne. Mary navigated a world where trust was scarce, betrayal frequent, and secrecy essential. Governance demanded intelligence, courage, and diplomacy. She balanced clan demands, enforced laws, and managed disputes while responding to external threats. Castles and estates became both home and prison during periods of confinement, yet she maintained influence through coded letters, alliances, and careful negotiation. Her life required constant vigilance, balancing personal desires with political necessity. Betrayal, plots, and rebellion were ever present, making survival as vital as rule. Mary faced the unique challenge of being a female ruler in a male-dominated world. Her authority depended on strategic thinking, manipulation of alliances, and adaptability. Even brief decisions could shift loyalties or provoke rebellion. Her reign, though fraught with danger, demonstrates the intersection of power, secrecy, and strategy. Decisions about marriage, diplomacy, or rebellion affected both domestic and international politics. Her legacy endures in Scottish history, architecture, letters, and legends, reflecting intelligence, courage, and resilience. Mary's life teaches that leadership is never simple. Survival, influence, and the exercise of power depend on skill, secrecy, and adaptability, leaving a story that continues to captivate and inspire. Forgotten battlefields that built Scotland. Scotland's hills, valleys, and rivers bear silent witness to countless battles that shaped the nation. Long before kingdoms stabilised, warriors, clans, and kings fought for survival, land, and influence. Villages, hilltops, and river crossings became stages of strategy and courage. Each clash left marks on the land and echoes in history, even when names and records are lost. life in war was harsh. Armies moved slowly, burdened with weapons and armour. Horses thundered, swords clashed, and arrows darkened the sky. Weather and terrain could decide battles instantly. Leaders relied on intelligence, observation, and cunning as much as strength. Victories secured territories, shifted alliances, or strengthened kings, while smaller skirmishes protected villages and preserved clan influence. Battlefields were chosen for strategy and symbolism, controlling rivers, passes, and fertile lands, or defending honour, loyalty, and revenge. Communities endured alongside warriors, rebuilding homes, tending livestock, and passing down stories of valour and survival. Archaeological finds, swords, shields, and coins reveal fragments of these forgotten conflicts, yet the full scale remains hidden. Stones, mounds, and rivers act as silent witnesses, carrying traces of courage, sacrifice, and strategy. Time has softened the landscapes, but walking these hills evokes the sounds of battle and the determination of those defending clan and home. Every clash contributed to culture, law, and political structure, teaching lessons of leadership, loyalty, and resilience. Generations adapted fortified settlements and protected resources while navigating shifting alliances. Sacrifice was constant. Families rebuilt and preserved knowledge for the next generation. Each hill, forest, and river holds stories of struggle, survival, and tactical skill. Forgotten battlefields show that Scotland was built not only by kings or treaties, but by the relentless effort of ordinary people, enduring in silence yet shaping identity, culture, and the nation's legacy. The land itself carries memory, connecting present-day visitors to generations who fought, survived, and forged Scotland through courage and determination, ancient forts that shouldn't exist. Scotland's hills and valleys hold silent traces of battles that shaped the nation long before maps, borders, or kingdoms existed. Warriors, clans, and kings fought to survive, defend territory, or expand influence, turning villages, hilltops, and river crossings into arenas of courage and strategy. Armies moved with heavy weapons and armour, horses thundered, swords clashed, and arrows darkened the sky. Victory depended on strength, intelligence, and cunning, with terrain and weather often deciding the outcome. Some battles determined which clans controlled land or which rulers claimed thrones, shaping trade, alliances, and culture. Others were smaller skirmishes, protecting villages or delaying invasions, yet all left marks on the land and memory of communities. People living near these sites endured fear and chaos, rebuilding after destruction while passing down lessons of bravery and strategy. Many battlefields are now quiet hills or fields, with stones, mounds, and rivers preserving echoes of conflict. Archaeological finds like swords, shields, and coins hint at the scale of wars long forgotten. Understanding these sites shows Scotland's resilience, revealing how leadership, courage, and sacrifice shaped identity. Every clash, whether recorded or forgotten, influenced laws, borders, and the nation's spirit. These landscapes connect modern visitors to the struggles of past generations, teaching that history is not only in kings or castles, but in the soil, stones, and rivers where ordinary people fought to protect family, clan, and land. Scotland's fortresses and battlefields are living memory, proving that courage, strategy, and endurance built the foundation of the nation, and that even silent victories continue to shape culture, identity, and pride centuries later. Scotland's castles with dark, real histories. Scotland's castles rise from hills, cliffs, and valleys, symbols of strength and history. Yet behind their walls lie dark realities. They were homes for kings and nobles, but also fortresses, prisons, and stages for intrigue. While lords and ladies feasted, warriors, servants, and prisoners faced hardship, danger, and death. Many castles were built to defend against invaders or rebellious clans, and sieges tested courage while walls bore scars of battle. Some became infamous for cruelty. Torture chambers, hidden prisons, and secret passages held those accused of betrayal, witchcraft, or rebellion. Power was enforced through fear, and alliances shifted constantly. A wrong word could bring imprisonment or execution. Historical records, letters, and chronicles confirm these truths. Executions were common, and entire families were sometimes imprisoned to control lands or enforce loyalty. Every stone absorbed human emotion: fear, rage, sorrow, and ambition. Castle architecture reflected constant danger. Narrow corridors, hidden rooms, reinforced gates, and secret stores of food and weapons allowed defenders to survive months under siege or trap enemies. Castles changed hands repeatedly, with each owner leaving marks of violence, revenge, or political maneuvering. Many are still linked to legends of ghosts and murder rooted in real events. Lords and kings faced threats not just from enemies, but from relatives, advisors, and unpredictable politics, making leadership a constant peril. Visiting these castles today reveals grandeur, yet the dark past demands imagination and respect for lives endured within. Dungeons, towers, and hidden rooms remind us that history was harsh. Stories of prisoners, betrayed nobles, and rebellious warriors show castles as living centres of heroism and horror, shaping Scotland politically, culturally, and socially for centuries. These shadowed histories teach lessons about human nature, leadership, ambition, and survival. They reveal that power often came at great risk, that resilience was essential, and that every stone witnessed both courage and cruelty. Scotland's castles are enduring symbols, monuments to the complex lives of those who built, defended, and suffered within them. Rome's biggest Scottish defeat buried in silence. Centuries ago, the Romans pushed north, seeking conquest, tribute, and glory, but Scotland's rugged hills, forests, and rivers became a deadly challenge. Local tribes, defending their homes, knew the land intimately. One battle, almost erased from history, became Rome's greatest defeat in Scotland. Roman legions, trained for open plains, struggled against ambushes, traps, and relentless attacks. Hills became fortresses, forests hiding places, rivers deadly obstacles. Supplies dwindled, morale collapsed, and thousands of soldiers fell as disciplined armies retreated in confusion. Roman historians rarely recorded the disaster, perhaps to preserve the image of invincibility, leaving the event shrouded in silence. Scottish warriors united, overcoming past rivalries to fight with strategy, knowledge, and courage. The victory was not only military but symbolic, showing that determination and understanding of terrain could defeat even the mightiest empire. Tribes coordinated defences, learned new tactics, and inspired generations to resist invaders. Archaeological finds, remnants of camps, weapons, and artifacts hint at the scale of the battle, but much remains unknown, buried by time. The clash shaped Scotland's identity, teaching lessons about unity, strategy, and resilience. Knowledge of land, patience, and coordination allowed smaller forces to prevail over a superior army. Walking the hills today, one can imagine warriors striking from ambush, rivers turning into traps, and the discipline of locals defeating an empire. The silence surrounding Rome's defeat enhances its significance. The victory was so complete that even history chose to downplay it. This forgotten battle left a lasting legacy. It strengthened clans, influenced military strategies, and fostered pride and defiance in a people who refused to submit. Scotland's hills, forests, and rivers carry memory of the triumph, proving that courage and unity can overcome overwhelming odds. Rome's largest Scottish defeat was more than a loss. It was a statement, a quiet testament to resilience, ingenuity, and the enduring spirit of a nation determined to defend its land. A nation built from clans, chaos, and ghost kings, Scotland's hills, glens, and rivers were shaped by clans, chaos, and kings whose names are lost to time. Before modern Scotland, the land was divided among powerful families who defended their territories with courage and ambition. Clans formed the backbone of society, bound by loyalty, blood, and tradition. Every member had a role, every chief had responsibility, and every battle could determine survival. Winters were harsh, food scarce, and disputes often settled with swords. Clans created culture, law, and identity, passing down stories, music, and customs that endure today. Rivalries between clans sparked battles over land, resources, and old grudges. Kings tried to unite them, but power was fragile. Alliances shifted, loyalty was conditional, and rulers navigated diplomacy, fear, and strategy. Ghost kings haunt history, rulers whose names were erased, whose reigns were brief, and whose deaths were mysterious. They left ruins, chronicles, and whispers that shaped borders, influenced clans, and left enduring legacies. Battles required intelligence, foresight, and strategy. A single decision could unite or destroy a clan or change history. The land itself shaped life. Rivers, hills, and forests were both protection and challenge, influencing settlements, fortresses, and tactics. Villages often developed in valleys near rivers for water and fertile soil, yet fortresses crowned hilltops for defence and observation. Roads and paths were forged not by planners but by necessity, connecting communities while navigating rugged terrain. Ordinary people endured raids, shifting alliances and harsh conditions, contributing to community survival and identity. Women and children managed farms, maintained livestock, and preserved food, while warriors defended homes and cultivated the landscape in times of peace. Over centuries, the interplay of clans, chaos, and kings forged a strong, resilient nation. Laws, traditions, and culture evolved from struggle, creating a society valuing loyalty, honour, and endurance. Festivals, music, and ceremonies maintained cohesion, reminding people of heritage and shared responsibility. Ghost kings may be forgotten, but their influence remains in borders, place names, and clan heritage. Trade routes, both inland and along coasts, connected clans to distant markets. Salt, fish, wool, and timber travelled by boat or horse, fostering both cooperation and conflict. Alliances often formed through marriages, while rival clans plotted to expand influence or claim new territory. Raids were not random. They followed careful planning and local knowledge, exploiting terrain and seasonal cycles. Leaders developed strategies for diplomacy, negotiation, and feigned retreats to outmaneuver opponents. Every skirmish left marks on culture, shaping stories, laws, and oral traditions. Warriors were celebrated, sometimes mythologized in song and story, ensuring that lessons in courage, patience, and strategy endured. Religion and spiritual beliefs also influenced power structures. Druids, early Christian monks, and local spiritual leaders guided rituals, blessed warriors, and mediated disputes. Sacred groves, wells, and hilltops were centres of decision-making and ceremonies. These spiritual practices intertwined with governance, providing legitimacy to chiefs and kings. Ghost kings often had ceremonial influence even after their deaths. The successors honoured prior rulers through rituals, burials, or commemorations. Over centuries, clans evolved into networks of loyalty and kinship that underpinned the political landscape. Some clans expanded, absorbing smaller families, while others fractured due to internal conflict or defeat in battle. The resilience of Scottish society came from its ability to adapt, absorb, and endure constant pressure from neighbours, invaders, and internal strife. Even lost kings played a role, as their short reigns influenced succession disputes, alliances, and territorial control. Their legacy persisted in the land, in the laws passed down, and in the survival strategies of ordinary people. Scotland's identity grew from survival, strategy, and resilience, not peace. The echoes of this past survive in festivals, clan gatherings, and stories, showing that nations are built by countless lives, struggles, and sacrifices. Clans, chaos, and ghost kings shaped a Scotland of courage, wisdom, and endurance, teaching that history, identity, and power are forged in struggle and remembrance. When did Scotland actually begin? Scotland's story begins long before kings, castles, or clans, shaped by nature, migration, and human determination. Hills, rivers, and lochs witnessed hunters, farmers, and settlers carving a life from rugged terrain. Communities formed near fertile valleys, rivers, and coasts, relying on land for survival, navigating harsh winters, scarce food, and wild animals. Tribes emerged with distinct customs, languages, and territories. Some were fierce warriors defending lands, others farmers, artisans, or traders connecting regions. Names like Picts, Gaels, and Britons mark waves of people whose lives intertwined, fought, and merged. The Picts, known for painted bodies and stone symbols, left hill forts, carvings, and traces of social organisation. Their symbols spoke of lineage, courage, and spiritual beliefs, providing a window into early political and religious life. They farmed valleys, fished rivers, and hunted game, while fortifying settlements against rival clans or raiders. The Gaels brought language, culture, and the seeds of kingdoms. Over time, intermarriage, alliances, and occasional conflict fused identities, forming a shared cultural foundation. Britons influenced laws, fortifications, and trade, leaving their mark in toponyms and early manuscripts. Interactions between these peoples were complex, full of conflict, alliances, and the slow building of identity. Borders shifted constantly, reflecting rugged terrain and local independence. Settlements often emerged where the land allowed food production, strategic defence, or access to rivers and coasts. Hill forts protected communities, while ceremonial sites marked sacred or political significance. Every raid, treaty, or marriage altered balance, shaping culture and territory. Centuries of battles, marriages, and alliances laid foundations for a distinct nation. By the early medieval period, larger kingdoms arose, yet power remained local, tied to land, loyalty, and defence. Christianity connected communities and rulers to wider Europe, introducing literacy, written law, and monastic centres. Monasteries preserved knowledge, facilitated trade, and influenced governance. Yet Scotland retained its unique character, shaped by terrain and internal struggle. Kings like Kenneth MacAlpin in the 9th and 10th centuries began uniting territories, although borders and leadership were still fluid. Successive rulers relied on clans and warriors for enforcement, while maintaining diplomacy with neighbours and within Scotland. Every battle, treaty, and alliance contributed to formation. Lost kings, vanished clans, and mysterious peoples left marks shaping language, law, and tradition. Seasonal migrations, farming cycles, and maritime trade influenced settlement patterns and social structures. Symbols carved in stone, place names, and oral stories preserved history, identity, and lessons for future generations. Scotland's beginning was not a moment but a flow of centuries, struggles, and triumphs. Hunters, farmers, clans, and kings built a nation through survival, culture, and endurance. Geography, culture, and human resilience forged a land rich in memory, strength, and character. Scotland emerged slowly, layered by the efforts of tribes, warriors, and communities, creating a nation unique, enduring, and alive with its past. The formation of laws, leadership, and trade networks developed gradually. Festivals, oral traditions, and early art sustained social cohesion. Every conflict, alliance, and adaptation contributed to political and cultural identity. Walking through hills, valleys, and ancient ruins, one can trace Scotland's development as an accumulation of human effort, endurance, and cultural synthesis. Every stone, river, and hill holds the legacy of survival, identity, and the slow emergence of a distinct nation.